This is Revolution Radio, rhythmslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Oh, that's us. That's us. Yeah. Hey, folks. Oh, that's the wrong bloody one. Good morning, America. Good afternoon, UK. And it's very late, Australia. Welcome to the Daily Chaos. Ordo and ruddy, chao, yeah, you know what I mean. The show ain't daily, but the chaos is. And whoa, multi-streaming big time today. God bless everybody listening. Thank you so much for turning up on revolution.radio. Revolution.radio. Also going out youtube.com/Daily Chaos and at dailychaos.news. Wait, it's a family thing because we are all in it together. Even if David Cameron, when he said that, was lying. Yeah, so please, hey, flip between those communities, people, and say hello to everybody. Introduce yourselves. Revolution.radio, fantastic place. Loads and loads of shows, free archive, lots and lots of patriots. Check it out. And my guest today, Daniel Jupp. Yeah, I've so been looking forward to picking this guy's brains. He's got a lot to say. Geopolitical, satirical wit, Daniel Jupp, here today, coming up in just a second. Right, so I got Daniel's bio here, yeah, and this is unabridged, what he wrote, more or less. Working class, English, Essex, 47, married, 2 kids, presents, yeah, he's a broadcaster on the side of the angels with Expat Radio. Going to find out about all of this, by the way. He is the author of A Gift for Treason, which I understand is about Marxism. I'm going to be asking him about that. And he says, a patriotic libertarian. And if you've read any of his stuff over on Facebook, you'll be wanting to listen to this show. Daniel, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Oh, it's lovely to have a chat with you. I've been looking forward to waxing lyrical with you, to hearing what you've got to say. Where do we start?
I can understand that, Ollie. I can understand that.
I want to pick over some of this bio with you, first of all, please.
Sure.
Why, for a start, do you classify yourself working class, you say?
Yes, I never used to be that class conscious. And I think the whole Brexit debate made me much more class conscious than I was previously, because I'm from, I would say, as I've said, a working class background. But my dad was sort of middle management. My mum was a cleaner most of her career. So I'm from a fairly ordinary background, is what I'd emphasise. I was the first person in my family, my extended family, to ever go to university, for example. So, that's my background. It's fairly average, comp school educated, normal background.
So you're proud.
Really,
you're rightly proud.
But I wasn't really that conscious of it because I was quite naturally right-wing, I suppose. I wasn't one of these people who was, like a Wolfie Smith character. And in fact, I tended to be the person kind of throwing scorn at those people. So I think I became more class conscious with the whole Brexit debate and seeing how that actually some of the aspects of argument that the left wing had put across were correct. There was a self-serving elite. there is a self-serving elite, and they don't have much concern for the ordinary working person. But the irony is that the people who are that self-serving elite have a whole host of other left-wing attitudes.
There was a huge amount of misrepresentation, particularly at the beginning of the, if you like, Brexit debate. I am personally averse to labels, but I use them like anybody else because maybe it's a bit lazy, but also it's kind of necessary too to generalize to a large extent, no?
Yeah, well, if you've read any of my posts, you know that I'm not afraid of generalizing. So, but I mean, we have to in the end. You know, we need something to attach our intellectual ideas to, and labeling people, then that's going to get you nowhere. But you know, and you could acknowledge things like left wing and right wing aren't really that relevant today, when you've got more of a conflict between people who are authoritarian and people who are libertarian, I think. And you've got national. Those are you know, the ground has shifted and the arguments have changed, but some of the labels are still necessary.
Yes, I agree. Daniel, your audio did cut in and out a wee bit there. I don't know if the plug needs, you know, shoving in, or there's a speck of dust or something.
Yeah, I've shoved my plug in harder for you, Ollie. At the risk of sounding like Julian Clary, you know, that's what I've done.
Okay, another label, one which actually is quite close to my heart, both of them. Patriotic libertarian. Well, talking of which, we lost a libertarian last night, didn't we? McAfee. He committed suicide in a jail in Barcelona. What's your take?
Another one of those convenient suicides, yes. There seems to be a lot of them, doesn't there?
It does make you wonder. It does. I mean, I did think Arkansas-sided or what? John McAfee, he ran as a libertarian candidate in 2016 and in 2020. Apparently, he didn't get past the primaries, as I understand. He said, he reckoned he had something like 30 terabits of documents that would be released in the event of his death. What is your take on what, I know we're speculating here, but on what might have happened?
Well, obviously, I don't know anything about the Spanish legal system. I didn't know a great deal about McAfee before this, other than what any ordinary person would know. You know, his connection with security systems for computing. But it just does seem that we are having a spate of these convenient suicides of people who, just after they've said that they have lots of information to release. And, you know, it's there's no smoke without fire. Some of these things are going to be genuine events, I believe.
It is curious, huh? I mean, it does smack of Jeffrey Epstein. But on the other hand, if he's got documents that might be released, I don't know. He had a tattoo on the side of his arm, whacked. And
yes, I know.
If I get suicided, I will not have committed suicide. I will have been whacked. And he got this tattoo to, I don't know. Well, I wanted to ask. I mean
there's some pretty big indicators there, aren't there? That, you know, that this is something that needs investigating. And whether it will be fully investigated or not, I don't know. It depends really on the honesty and probity of the Spanish authorities. It would take a Spaniard to give a better answer on that one.
Yeah, right. Well, anyone's guess there. Ghislaine Maxwell is due to take the stand. So that's Epstein's madam, who was picking up the underage girls, the teenagers.
There must be, I don't want to kind of precipitate this, but there must be some kind of death clock running on her now, isn't there? There must be a website with a clock ticking down to when she is going to release evidence, and whether she will have a mysterious suicide before that point.
Yeah. Do you think? Can you see her making the stand?
Not really, no. If I'm honest, I certainly can't see anything coming out that will lead to prosecutions of more powerful people.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I want to ask you about all sorts of things around that. We might come on to another character in the Black Book of Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew Neil, in just a minute, and GB News. Before we do, let me ask you about your news show, On the Side of the Angels, lovely name, and Expat Radio. Tell us a bit about that, please.
Well, I've been quite active online, and I started getting more and more politically engaged online. And a lovely woman called Lorraine Findlay started following me, and she loved the posts I was making and the points I was making. And she worked at Expat Radio. She had a show of her own. And she said to David Haworth, who owns the station, she pointed out to him that, there's this guy, I want to interview him. I love his posts. I like what he's saying. And so that's what she did. And I was interviewed on her show. And then she suggested to Dave that I should get a show of my own on Expat Radio. So really, she championed me and, put me forward as a candidate to have a show of my own. And I've been co-hosting a show with her ever since.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, I've just put that up on the screen for folks, expatmedia.onl, if you want to check that out. All of us
they're
patriotic.
online. Exactly, they're online only, but you can get them from Alexa, and they go out to expats all over the world. So we've got listeners in America and listeners in Australia, etc., everywhere, really.
And that's Revolution Radio as well, by the way. We've got to, as much as we can, join forces and help get the message out. Before I ask you about the message, Daniel, you're the author of A Gift for Treason. Tell us about that. That's your book, yeah?
Yeah, well, that's a book I wrote. It's called A Gift for Treason, The Cultural Marxist Assault on Western Civilization. So it's not the shortest of titles, but I wrote that in 2019, and that came out in 2019. And obviously, I didn't see the huge firestorm of destruction of liberties that was coming. I didn't predict coronavirus, but I was warning in that, because I've been worrying about it for years, about the trends that we were seeing with wokeness, with cultural Marxism, with a whole series of attacks on what had at one point been considered ordinary, decent Western values. So the book was written really as a defense of Western civilization and an explanation of some of the kind of root causes and influences on woke ideas, if you like, that are attacking Western civilization.
I just was looking at the comments, and Celtic Vixen says he was suicided, presumably talking about McAfee. Yeah, did he have dirt on the Clintons? And one or two folks have said that there was a bit of an echo as well, and I just wondered if that echo is gone. It's still there, says Carlos. Let me know if you can hear it on Revolution Radio, please. If there is an echo for you, let us know in the comments.
Well, I apologise if the echo's coming from my end, but
it's not you, sir.
It's not you. Me. Oh, that's okay.
No, it's not you, because I've got you coming straight into my ear, and you sound fantastic. So if it's anything, it is with my mixing here, and slightly better, says Celtic Vixen, and oh blimey. Anyway, we'll get there. Let me know if you can hear it at Revolution Radio as well.
I'm surprised we haven't been taken down for the disgraceful slur on the completely innocent Clintons. I can't believe that anyone out there would imagine that you can't completely innocently know 30-odd people who've died under mysterious circumstances. I mean, we are all in that position.
I've got Sorry Sunflower Willow over at Revolution Radio saying no echo, Ollie. I think it's I think it should be okay. Oh, blimey. Okay, right. Yes, the Clintons. I think that YouTube and co must have given up on everybody who has been talking about the list, the trail of death that surrounds them, which are quite incredible, quite unbelievable.
Well, I just assume that the garden of their main house must look like Arlington Cemetery by now. You know, there must be huge number of headstones out there that they can walk around and, they can walk around and remember their old friends. You know, it's astonishing, really, if you think about it. The number of times there are these allegations, and that there hasn't been any serious investigation, as far as I'm aware. No attempt at a serious investigation. And surely, if they were completely innocent, they would want to clear their names as rapidly as possible.
Yeah, you would think so. You would think so. Where are we, Daniel? What is going on today? What are these stories right now, today, that you're most concerned about, or that you've been writing about today?
Well, I suppose I'm most concerned about the fact that we have no effective opposition to any of the I think, frankly, totalitarian policies that have been followed in response to coronavirus. So that's the big one for me, really, because there's not effective opposition within the Conservative Party, and there's not effective opposition from the Labour Party in the UK. And this is a similar story in countries around the world, Western democracies, supposedly, around the world, that have instigated measures that reverse centuries of progress in terms of individual liberty and freedom. And they have done this quite casually and quite broadly, and there has been very, very little pushback. And they've done this in terms of a pandemic and supposedly protecting people. But if someone locks me in a cellar and they claim it's for my freedom, they have still taken my freedom away. You know, if they're claiming it's for my safety, they have still locked me in a cellar. And people might think that that's metaphorical or that's exaggerated. You know, people are now...
It's happening.
It's happening, and it's happened. We had people arrested in the UK for sitting on a park bench. That's the reality. You know, we've had images put on posters by the NHS that are blatantly and frankly totalitarian propaganda in terms of, you know, can you look this person in the eye, and kind of guilt tripping people into considering themselves as a vector of disease. And that is the behaviour of a tyranny. It's not the behaviour of a democracy in any sense. And we may have some kind of surface illusory freedoms. We may, you know, there's not a, you know, there's not people being shipped off to be tortured in front of our eyes. So it's not an overt tyranny, but there's a subtle tyranny that's been imposed on us. And we've got a lot.
I don't think it's so subtle, is it?
No,
I don't know that it's so subtle.
It's subtle in the sense that, you know, you can go out for a pint of milk and you're not going to be rugby tackled to the ground by a secret policeman. You know, that's not going to happen to you. But your opportunities can be restricted for your thoughts and your opinions, but are perfectly safe and legitimate thoughts and opinions. You know, you can be denied a job on your skin colour in this country or in America. You can be you can have all kind. You can be sacked for private opinions you've posted to your friends and only your friends on social media.
That's right.
There's lots of ways in which our freedom is less than it was, and this is something that's ratcheting up and it's increasing all the time. And at the same time, we can see that all of the new rules and restrictions that are applied to us aren't lived by the people applying those restrictions. You know, they don't apply any of this to themselves. Do
you think that we do actually have opposition parties. I mean, for example, in the UK, that Keir Starmer seems to be essentially backing Boris all the way in, as I agree with you, these totalitarian measures.
Well, we don't have champions of good. We just have degrees of evil. I think that's the problem. You know, I mean, famously.
Do you think they're in cahoots?
To an extent. I don't think, you know, I don't think there's some kind of Masonic Lodge meeting hall where Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson get together and give each other secret handshakes. I don't think it's anything like that. But I think there is such a consensus of opinion and such a herd mentality in the political class and the media class that's so divorced from ordinary people now. There's such a massive gap between the people they talk to, the people they know and interact with, and the opinions that occur there, and the opinions on the street and those of the ordinary working man, that it's almost like you don't need a conspiracy. You just need this herd mentality that it's the same type of people having the same kind of thoughts. And that's the key issue, I think.
This totalitarianism that we seem to be in now, in this time, is brought about, it seems to me, off the back of really one thing, and that is, or one thing more than anything else, and that is the overcycled PCR tests being used to lock us all down and so on and so forth.
Which
and
where
are the questions? Where are the questions from the opposition? Where are the questions from the opposition, Daniel?
This is why we, you know, Keir Starmer was recently famously thrown out of a pub, wasn't he? This is an ordinary Labour voter. And this is what happens now when a mainstream politician interacts with a real member of the public, because, you know, they normally have selected audiences and they don't interact with ordinary members of the public in their private lives ever. You know, Keir Starmer will only know people like Keir Starmer. He won't have a friend who works at Asda. You know, they won't interact with ordinary people whatsoever. You know, I think the very, very valid point that was made by the publican who threw Keir Starmer out of his pub was that there is no opposition, because, you know, on lockdown, we've had a Tory government that wants severe lockdowns, and we've had a Labour government that wants more severe lockdowns. So if you don't want lockdowns, and if you oppose lockdowns, you've got no representation. You know, the Liberal Democrats are in favour of lockdowns as well. So there was no representation for the large percentage of people who looked at the evidence for themselves and looked at things like the Great Barrington Declaration and saw that there was another policy approach that could have been taken and that probably would have saved more lives. You know, that's the key element here, because we haven't got accurate estimates of how many people have been killed by lockdown measures. We don't have that. The government's not looking for that. You know,
what do you think of the statistics, so far as the deaths are concerned, so far as adverse reactions are concerned of the vaccine? In general, what do you think of the statistics? What are the problems with them?
Well, they're based on flawed methodology, and they're given by people who have an agenda. You know, Professor Ferguson has been failing for 20 years in his modelling and in his estimates. This is the guy that basically got, for example, Fauci to lock down the United States. They're saying there will be about 2 million people would die in the US, and, you know, millions in the UK would die, and so on. This was Neil Ferguson that put the fear of God, supposedly, as we understand. He estimated 500,000 deaths in the UK from coronavirus. Now, they've used a methodology of counting deaths, which is itself absurd, because they've said any death within 28 days of a positive test, and they've counted those as a death from coronavirus rather than a death with coronavirus. The test itself, as we've seen, you know, various tests that have been used for estimating the number of people who are cases of coronavirus, the tests themselves are flawed and give false positives. So you've overestimated the number of people who are cases, you've overestimated the number of people who are deaths, and you have overestimated the potential deaths, because you're using modelling that was designed 15 years ago for a completely different condition and failed to be accurate then. It is utterly absurd that someone like Professor Ferguson is still listened to. It's absurd. He has failed again and again, and his failures have had serious consequences on policy. And, you know, I think they're borderline criminals to be listening to that person still.
Yeah, no, he failed. What was it, the foot and mouth, and that was
and
turned out to be
also,
nonsense.
Absolute nonsense what he estimated for foot and mouth, and it was absolute nonsense as well. He estimated that you know, thousands of people would die of so-called mad cow disease. You know, the modelling was wildly inaccurate, and it has been again and again. And it has been on everything it's ever been applied to. For 15 years, this modelling has been applied to things inaccurately. He has.
And why is Boris listening to someone with such a bad record? If you and I, and so many people online are discussing the overcycled PCR tests, the guy that invented the test said it was unsuitable for measuring coronavirus, you know, whether or not you've got it. And why?
I know. Well, this is just one of the patent absurdities, isn't it? Because you've got the guy who invented the technology they are using saying it shouldn't be used in this way, and they are still doing it. And the why is you've got to start thinking, well, maybe it's because there is an agenda that's other than dealing with a pandemic. Because there's so many ludicrous things that have been done as part of coronavirus policy. You know, the whole mask things. We now have, after Dr. Fauci's emails were released in the US, we now know that the experts who were demanding that people wear masks, and sometimes Dr. Fauci at one point was saying people should wear 2 masks.
And their wife's stockings over the top.
Exactly. It's utterly ridiculous. We were given these masks as magic talismans, you know, that they had this magical curative property. And it was almost like something from the Middle Ages where you have your relic from a saint, and this will protect you from harm. Because the scientific evidence is, the clinical evidence is, most of the masks that people use specify on their product specifications that they do not do anything to stop viral transmission. And yet people are using these. If they were serious about these masks and thinking that these masks are efficacious and work, then they would have specified only the type of mask that is designed to stop viral transmission. And that would be the only type of mask that people would wear on the street. But they don't, because it was a gesture move. And it was a move more about controlling your populace and seeing how many people obey than it was about protecting people. These masks are useless. They're utterly useless. They have no positive effect whatsoever. You might get a few percentage points difference in transference from, you know, someone infected to someone not infected if the infected person is wearing a mask. But if your policies like self-isolation are correct, then you wouldn't even need that anyway. So we are thrown, you know, thousands of tons of plastic into the oceans from supposedly green concerned governments, you know, concerned about the ecology of the world. We produce this huge amount of plastic. The plastic itself is harmful in the long term if you're constantly shoving it over your mouth. And all for nothing, for a token gesture. These things don't actually protect people. There's no protection given to a person wearing a mask by that mask.
Is it a token?
And we had this admitted from the people who were pressing the policy. You know, it's in Dr. Fauci's emails, and I'm sure Dr. Fauci was communicating with Whitty and Valance.
Yeah, I just wonder if they're trying somehow to dehumanize us. It's a little bit like this whole, you know, trans thing. I mean, you know, people have got problems with their sexuality or whatever. That's a different issue. But I don't there just seems to be, for example, now there is a bloke, somebody with, who's got something dangling between his legs or whatever,
Yeah.
is now going to be competing in female weightlifting at the Olympics. I just wonder, are they not trying to dehumanize
Well,
this?
a lot of these things are on the surface, they're disconnected, and and they are different issues. So and there is a trans lobby, isn't there? Or quite obviously, there are people who are politically, individually profiting from being self-elected advocates of trans rights. They get notoriety, notice, and money that they wouldn't have got otherwise. And that's why they're doing it. So there's an obvious element of self-interest there. And we've seen the same with all kinds of movements. It's the same thing with Black Lives Matter on racial issues. It's the same thing, which, we see this in lots of different areas. So there's that element of it for a start. But there's also, it does seem to be that governments of the world, Western governments, are quite keen on all this stuff, and they do support it. And transnational bodies like the UN, like the WEF, are all very woke and very enthusiastic about all of this stuff. And you have to consider, if you make people accept patent lies, like the lie that there can be such a thing as a female penis, or that an obvious genetic male is somehow a female. If you can make people accept those lies, then there's a whole host of other political lies you can force them to accept as well. And those people, your general public, are conditioned to accept lies, which obviously serves people who have nefarious ends, whatever they may be.
The Biden administration, they put together their, I don't know, some bill or whatever, some economy bill. I'm not sure what bill it was, but I do understand that any references to mothers were replaced with the reference birthing people.
Yeah.
So it's going on right at the heart of government, even in the United States.
Well, I mean, all of these things have their special interest groups advocating for them. And what we've seen really, I mean, woke politics is essentially gather together every special interest group, and they will become the new majority, and they will keep you in power indefinitely. Because if you're pandering to each of them, they outnumber what was the old majority. That seems to be the thinking behind it.
Really? Do you think that even though some of these minorities can be joined together, do you really think that they outnumber the majority?
I don't think they do. I think I do believe that the silent majority is true, but I think this is the thinking of the strategists of kind of woke groups and woke politics, because they know those groups are more vocal and more politically engaged than the average person. So they gain more by gaining those people's support. In their eyes, I don't know if this is necessarily true, but in their eyes they gain more than they lose by offending the silent majority, because they know the silent majority will carry on paying their taxes, carry on doing their jobs, carry on being responsible and law-abiding. So they almost don't have to pander to people who are social. They only have to pander to people who are antisocial. And that's the demographic that they're looking to support all the time.
Just incredible. I mean, what we're seeing, it seems to me, with woke culture is common decency just flying out of the window. I mean, to me, we shouldn't be talking about, earlier we mentioned class, and personally it's like, well, so what? And hence I asked you that question. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be proud of putting yourself up by the bootstraps. You should, absolutely. But to me, it's like, a bit so what? And it's the same with color, and it's the same with religion, and it's the same with sex.
I think you're You are absolutely right there, and this is the thinking that everyone should abide by. But I'm very specific about saying working class now, not because I resent people who are wealthy or more successful than me. I don't. I want to see more of those people. I specify class because we've seen the formation of in the Soviet Union. They used to call it a nomenclatura. A political class that serves its own interests. Through party politics and through a one-party state, but they're a separate class and they're not connected to anyone else in any reasonable or meaningful manner. And I'm afraid that's what we see now with our media and political class. They're a nomenclatura. They are a self-elected, self-fulfilling, completely self-interested group of people who have very little regard for the average person on the street, or understanding of them, or recognition of their lives, or the impacts of the policies that are put on them. So that's why I specify working class. But your general point that we should look beyond that is absolutely correct. And this is the old Enlightenment values. The classically liberal Enlightenment value that we should judge everyone as a human being as equal. And with the same political rights and with no special regard for their race or their gender, is something I entirely endorse. And we shouldn't be focusing on those things. The trouble is the other side are focusing on those things. So, I'm forced into the position of being bothered about the fact that I'm white, when I want to be like Martin Luther King, and I want everyone to be judged by the content of their character. But I have to stand up and speak on absolutely. But I have to stand up and speak on behalf of white people, because we are the people that it's kind of officially endorsed and legitimate now to oppress whilst calling oppressors. That's the problem that we have, because woke politics and this version of left-wing politics that is now dominant in the mainstream is dividing all of us, and it's doing it deliberately. It's doing it constantly. And it's doing it along the lines of race, class, and gender.
And that is, you read my next question, divide and rule, because it seems to me, for example, that BLM has set race relations back by 30 years.
Oh, more than that. They have been disastrous for race relations. And, the wise, intelligent, brilliant ethnic minority speakers and thinkers who are generally on the right have known this. They've got this. They've nailed this. Whether you go from Thomas Sowell or whether you go to Candace Owens, there are black thinkers and presenters and writers who know this, that Black Lives Matter are disastrous for black people and for white people, because you are dividing people by skin colour. You're encouraging alienation and disagreement between them. And, you are sowing the seeds of racial conflict.
Now, BLM is partly funded by George Soros via one of his groups, at least. Does it not have a malfeasant agenda? Is it really about equality in a very, very perverse way of looking at it? Because to me, the slogan Black Lives Matter is a racist slogan, just as would be White Lives Matter. However, it seems to me you have to think that either both of those slogans are racist or neither of them are. That's the only way you can be logically consistent. So Black Lives Matter is a racist slogan. It's a racist organisation. And you look into it, the hateful comments that have been made about Jews and about white people by leaders of Black Lives Matter, there's thousands of them. And, this is what you get with people who believe critical race theory, which is basically a generational race hate theory akin to theories that Nazis gave against Jews. It's using exactly the same logic about white people. All their privilege is unearned. They conspire against other races. They oppress other races. They're engaged in a constant secret conspiracy against other races. Well, those are the things that Nazis said about Jews and that anti-Semites say today about Jews.
And those are the things that critical race theory says about white people. And this is being taught in schools and universities. It's being officially endorsed in supposed democratic enlightened nations. So it's the most dangerous racial politics we've seen since the end of World War II.
How dangerous?
Well, I think it's extraordinarily dangerous because what we are doing at the moment in our media, in our entertainment, in our films, in our articles in newspapers, and in our classrooms is telling people that white people are inherently evil. And you do that long enough about any racial group, and that racial group will start to be killed in large numbers. That's how dangerous it is. It will happen.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the figures for racial assaults in the US, there's a huge preponderance of assaults on white people, not from white people, who are the majority of the population, but on white people. You know, there's a massively disproportionate gap between the number of white people who are deciding to go out and attack black people or Asian people and the number of black people primarily. And we've got to be honest about this, you know, who have been conditioned to believe that white people are the enemy, that are going out and physically assaulting white people for their whiteness. You know, and there was it was estimated a year or two ago 500,000 racial assaults on white people in the US, racially motivated assaults. Now, if that was applied to any other group, there would be absolute uproar. If any other race was being subjected to the kind of forced evictions, rapes, tortures, murders that have happened to white farmers in Africa, for example, it would be an enormous scandal. And there would be, you know, you'd have every musician, every actor standing up saying we've got to end this racism towards this group. But they don't do it. And they don't do it with regard to racism towards Jewish people either. You know, we've now got to the point where people drive through the streets of London with loud hailers saying that Jewish women should be raped. And mainstream media barely cover this. They barely cover it because they're only concerned, apparently, about what happened to George Floyd or about what happens to black lifelong criminals who constitute the majority of people who've been killed by black police officers, by white police officers.
And this is dangerous, not only for white people, but also for black people, because their minds are being polluted with lies. For example, George Floyd didn't deserve any hero worship. He was a thug who once took a knife to the throat of a pregnant woman. He had deserved nothing. He was a high on meth and goodness knows what. He had a heart attack off the back of it, etc., etc., etc. It's outrageous that cop went to prison over that. The black people surely should be the same as white people. They should be taught about the wonders you mentioned earlier of Martin Luther King. People like that should be role models, no?
Oh, absolutely. You know, Thomas Sowell should be the role model for black people in the US or anywhere. You know, Thomas Sowell is an absolute genius, and he debunked a lot of the.
Who was that?
He's a black academic, economist, and author, and he wrote as early as the 1970s. He was debunking in live television debates and in a series of books. He went through and he looked at the evidence regarding disparities caused by race and gender. So he looked at the feminist argument and you know, analysed in a series of books whether there was such a thing as a glass ceiling, whether there was discrimination against women in the workplace, etc. And he found logical, rational causes for the disparities that existed. For example, the example with feminism is that Thomas Sowell proved that most of the disparities that exist because women were in long-term employment for fewer years than men. So what would happen is that a woman would be in a position in a workplace, and then she'd stop, have a baby, have children, raise them for a while, then go back to the workplace. And she might go back part-time, or she might go back fully employed. But obviously, because she was starting anew, she'd start at a lower rung, or she'd start at the same level that she left. So, and in those years that the maybe her husband or whatever was still working, he was progressing in his career, because you stay at a company long enough, you progress at that company in most cases. So most of the disparity in terms of where the women were on average sitting in the workplace and where the man was came from their own choices in terms of leaving work to form a family, which, you know, is a biological necessity that women had to have time off to do that. And many of them choosing to then return to work only part-time. So this idea that there was a conspiracy of men deliberately holding back women, which is still, you know, raised as if it's true. Now, Thomas Sowell debunked that in the 1970s with evidence, with exhaustive evidence, because, you know, I've only given a précis of what he said, and a very kind of simple version of what he said. But he did the same with racial policy and racial thinking, because he said, you know, these disparities come mainly from following essentially bad choices in life, you know. And if you have a situation where fatherhood and parental abandonment is a real problem in the black community, and it wasn't in the 1950s and the 1960s. You know, the black community in the US, the rates at which fathers stayed with their family and raised them were comparable or better than the rates at which that was happening in white families. But there has been, since the 1960s, and since various forms of affirmative action supposed to help these families, what these affirmative action policies did is they actually removed the financial need for a father, because people were on welfare. And so, you know, a father could more easily abandon his responsibilities. And that has a devastating social impact. And that's what happened in the black community. Left-wing policies of supplying lots of welfare removed the need for a father. But a father supplies a huge psychological basis of well-being for a child and a child's development, you know, just as a mother does as well, obviously, but a father does that. And a two-party family is the most stable unit for creating happy and contented citizens that you'll ever have. And absolutely. Thomas Sowell looked at this stuff very deeply, you know, in a far more analytical way than I ever have. And he gathered huge amounts of evidence, and he proved the case that you know, racial disparities were not caused by some white conspiracy against black people. That doesn't mean that there was never discrimination against black people. Obviously, there were Jim Crow laws. You know, there was segregation. Martin Luther King was entirely necessary, and to change that society at that point. But the solutions that the left wing has followed since then have made life worse for black communities, not better. And, you know, if you teach people that they are not responsible for anything bad that happens to them, they have no individual responsibility, the whole of society conspires against them anyway, so they might as well be a criminal, then that's what you get. You get negative outcomes and you get criminals. Because they think society is geared against them anyway. So why not steal a car, you know? And then they get put in prison. Why not be disrespectful and aggressive all the time? And then, of course, there are physical consequences for behaving like that. And these are the lessons that were given to the black community in the US. And you know, the wisest and the best and the most enlightened black people in the US have obviously rejected all of this and raised decent, sensible families. But the people who follow Black Lives Matter won't do that, because Black Lives Matter is telling them it's all geared against you. So, yeah, burn that car. set fire to that building, riot, loot, murder, because society is geared against you anyway. So of course you get more negative consequences.
It seems to me quite ironic that black folks in the States have wound up with a president who was the guy that devised the 3 strikes and you're out law under the Clinton administration.
Somehow we're supposed to believe that he's less racist than the guy who provided the best employment opportunities for black people of any recent president. Trump actually did policies that helped the black community enormously. And there are black leaders who acknowledge this, and we should be aware of them. But Biden, to me, is very representative of what's happened with racism, essentially, in the Western world. Because what's happened is we didn't defeat racism, we just changed the target. We've changed the target from, yes, there was a point in our history, in our past, where it was objectively true that black-skinned people or brown-skinned people would have been treated worse than white-skinned people in our societies. That's objectively true. You look at the past and we know that's the case. But what they did is they then decided that they would solve this, they would heal this by mistreating white people. And you had the Martin Luther King option, which is let's move to a society where we treat everyone equally and we're conscious of their worth as an individual and we judge them by the content of their character, their individual behaviour. That's the society we were moving to for a while and we should have moved to. But what we've replaced it with instead is now judging everyone white as guilty and an oppressor. And we've just switched the target of the racism. We've just switched the group that's being mistreated, and you won't get any progress that way.
We've got a break coming up in 2 minutes time, 3 minutes time. Let me just take a couple of comments. We've got Celtic Vixen saying women have had to fight for equality and safety for decades. Then men who claim they're women can come along and trample and all that's been achieved. Helen Smith, yes. The MPs conduct themselves entirely to their own satisfaction. Celtic Vixen, the class thing was used to try and cause division. Then it was sexuality, and now it's race. Stop playing their games, for goodness sake. Helen Smith, disobey is what we do. Celtic Vixen, we need to stop mass migration or we will become the minority in our own country by the 2060s. The minorities have more children too. That's an issue we'll come on to.
I think the estimate is earlier than that. I think it's 2050 for the UK that the old white majority will be considered a minority. Now, I'm not really bothered by skin. I don't want to be bothered by skin color. I'm only bothered about it because
that's not the point, though, is it?
No,
that's not the point. It's about your culture not being downtrodden any more than you should downtread another culture.
Absolutely, and it's the double standards that are applied because if millions of people poured into an African nation. Millions of white people poured into an African nation now, or
the Chinese are actually. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, the Chinese are colonizing Africa, and that's apparently okay. But
we're running out of time.
If any of these things were going in the other direction, then of course they would be commented on.
Daniel, we will be back to talk about all of this in just a few minutes' time, folks. Nearly time to get a cup of tea. You're listening to Daily Chaos. I'm Olly Connelly with my special guest, Daniel Jupp. God bless him. And Thursday at this time is when you can listen to this show at dailychaos.news, at youtube.com/dailychaos, and most importantly at revolution.radio. So please come and support the network, check it out, and what have you. After we come back, I'm going to be asking Daniel about underlying agendas here. I think many people, if not the vast majority of people listening to the show today, have heard about the Great Reset. I'm going to be asking Daniel about his take on that. We'll be talking a bit about border force in the UK and the border wall in the States and goodness knows what else, to basically see how we might preserve. And we're going to be asking, why do people put up with these psychos in charge? Coming back in a few minutes' time. God bless you. Dirty Chaos.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Revolution Radio.
What the heck is the Truth Jihad? Hey, I'm Kevin Barrett, host of Truth Jihad Radio. Federal prosecutors, Department of Homeland Security agents, and curious passersby often ask me, just what is this Truth Jihad thing anyway? Well, everybody knows what truth is, but jihad is a misunderstood term. Jihad means effort or struggle. The greater jihad is the struggle to be a better person, while the lesser jihad is the struggle to defend the community. Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, did say that the best jihad is a word of truth flung in the face of a tyrant. And that's what we do here at Truth Jihad Radio. Every Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 7 Pacific, right here on Revolution Radio.
Hey everyone, it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Hey guys, Scorpio here. Join me every Saturday at 2 p.m. here on Studio A for the Scorpio Conspiracy Show, where we discuss the hidden agendas that impact our lives and uncover the secret societies and the shadowy elite who construct the reality that we are supposed to believe. So be there Saturdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, here on Studio A on Revolution Radio, and learn what's really going down.
Lost a little honey on the lone highway, left me for another on the lone highway. They killed Dirty Dog McGee on the lone highway.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey folks, right, okay, you're tuned in to Daily Chaos with me, Olly Connelly. Thanks for turning up. And my special guest today, Daniel Jupp, and a fascinating conversation. Really, clearly this guy knows his stuff. Daniel, we were talking all about some of the things that are actually going on. I want to ask you more about the underlying agenda that we're hearing about. Let's maybe lead into that via some of what I perceive personally. Correct me, tell me what your thoughts are on this chicanery, for example, from the likes of Fauci, who's gone, all over the shop in terms of the kind of things that he's been saying in how we should be tackling this crisis. Then it turns out that maybe this is a manufactured crisis in a laboratory, and there's a lot of evidence for that now. And we're seeing similar chicanery at number 10 Downing Street, for example, with Boris Johnson. He was, for example, saying we absolutely would be coming out of this, this kind of lockdown scenario. What was it, the 21st of June or so? That's now put back to the 19th of July. There doesn't seem to be any justification for that off the back of, again, these phony PCRs, these hyped death stats that we were talking about in the first half.
Even on their own evidence, there's very little to suggest why a lockdown would be extended. We've got so few people, which is a good thing, obviously. We should celebrate it. We've got so few people actually dying of coronavirus at the moment. There's no way they could possibly claim, as they did for the very first one, when it was 3 weeks to flatten the curve. There's no way they can claim that the NHS is due to be overwhelmed by coronavirus patients. And there's no way that they can say that the indicators are negative, because we've had cases rise, but cases rising when you're basing it on faulty testing means nothing. Cases rising when those people aren't being hospitalised means nothing. What you're saying is those are people with no symptoms, or they're people with mild symptoms that aren't being hospitalised. The only thing that could possibly justify extending lockdown would be if there was a massive rise in the number of people dying, or a massive rise in the number of people being hospitalised with serious conditions. And that's not happening. Neither of those things are happening. They haven't been happening for a very long time. We've got very, very few people. They're usually very elderly. The average age of people dying from coronavirus is well into the 80s.
82, no?
Yeah, 82. So it's above the actual average age of death, for a start. If you want to survive an extra year, catch coronavirus.
Go on. I tell you, it killed off flu. Flu's a casualty.
Yeah, well, funny how that suddenly disappeared altogether, isn't it? But
now they're saying
flu is killing more people than coronavirus by a significant margin. So you cannot justify the extending lockdown whatsoever.
It's farcical. It's farcical.
It is absolutely farcical.
I do wonder what the true agenda is here, because you look at the stats, you look at there was that guy, Mark Sexton, for example, that went into a police station the other day, had a load of evidence. One of the pieces of evidence he pulled out was that there were less deaths in the biggest metropolitan city in Europe, Birmingham, apparently, according to him, an ex-cop. He came up with this raft of evidence he did than in the last five or 7 years. Less deaths in 2020, which was supposed to have been the bulk of the coronavirus problem so far. Why are people putting up with this?
Well, people are putting up with it because there's been a very sustained, very active propaganda campaign. And if you look at the who is on the SAGE body, you know, they don't actually have a virologist on the SAGE body advising the government, but they do have psyops specialists. They do have people who are psychologists who have studied how to influence public opinion. That's who they have on SAGE. They have those, and they have mathematical modelers. You know, I think they have a couple of biologists as well, but they don't have any virologists, you know, which you'd have on there if you were really concerned about the pandemic itself.
That's right.
And they've advised the government. We've had NHS campaigns. We had the whole clapping for the NHS, and we've had a long sustained campaign to demonise people who advocate any other position. And we've had, you know, social media companies have silenced sensible, rational, legitimate commentary from experts in the field. You know, people like Dr. Yeadon. This was the ex-head of Pfizer Research. You know,
Yeadley, Michael Yeadley.
Yeah, the ex-head of Pfizer Research. You know.
Yes, that's right. Chief scientist and vice president of Pfizer.
And someone involved in pharmaceutical development for his whole career, you know. These aren't cowboys. Some of the people who object to it, the signatories of the Great Barrington Declaration, who are doctors, virologists, experts, and specialists. Why should we ignore their science? You know, or even something like
Yeadley. He says we're standing at the gates of hell by taking this vaccine.
And that should cause serious concern.
But he's not being interviewed. He's not being interviewed, is he? He's not on the telly.
No. And, you know, media organisations have effectively conspired with the government to silence legitimate opposition to these policies. And, you know, if you just looked at the average death rates for coronavirus itself, you know, the variants don't change that much. So all scaremongering about variants, they're no more deadly. None of the variants are more deadly. Some of them are more infectious, but none of them are more deadly than the original virus. If you look at the death rate,
Yeadley says that they're not variants at all. They're in the traditional sense of the way science measures a new virus variant. He says they're not variants. He calls them samients because they are so similar in their makeup that there's trace difference between these variants are being used to put us back into lockdown.
Absolutely, that's what they're used for. You know, every time we look like we're getting out of a lockdown, then there's a new variant conveniently pops up that's supposedly a threat, but they aren't a threat. They might increase rates of cases, but they don't increase hospitalizations or deaths. They haven't done so far, not by any significant degree, and certainly not by a degree that justifies the shutting down of large sections of your economy and all the negative consequences that occur from lockdowns. You know, you've got people killing themselves because of lockdowns. You've got a massive backlog. They reckon it may be as high as 12.5 million people waiting on operations now, waiting on treatment that they haven't had. You know, we've got the worst backlog we've had for a generation in the National Health Service, caused by lockdown. And you've got cancer and heart patients who will have died and are dying because of lockdown. You've got cancer patients who aren't being diagnosed because they're not seeing their GPs in person. You can now specially request to see your GP in person. But lots of people who would have been detected with cancer, lots of people who would have been helped with heart conditions, and lots of other serious conditions that GPs spot from regular meetings with their patients, they are not being detected, and they will die. And
there's hardly any debate. Again.
And there's hardly any debate about it. And we've sort of prioritised coronavirus so much that we've sort of said to people, well, if you've got cancer or if you're a heart patient, we don't particularly care, and you can go ahead and die because we're saving these other patients over here from an illness that 80% of people won't notice they've got any symptoms from, and that, has 99.99 more percent survival rate, and that is no danger to most people.
It's disgusting. What to you is the definition of a pandemic?
Well, I think we should have gone with the old definition, which I note that they changed. The World Health Organization actually changed their definition of a pandemic in order to count coronavirus as a pandemic. That in itself, when you're changing your technical definitions to fit a case you're making, that in itself is a warning sign.
That was about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, something they did that, didn't they? Because when I was growing up, I mean, we were all taught at school about the Black Death and all that. They were probably history lessons that pricked up our ears because it was kind of, I don't know, morbidly sexy or something. And they were talking about pandemics. And we kind of had the impression, I think, growing up, that a pandemic was when you walk down the street and there were bodies lying in the gutter, dead.
Yes.
Along the road. And now this pandemic, I didn't even really know anybody particularly that's affected. Oh, maybe they've had a cold or something, or else they were elderly. And I'm hearing loads in the media, loads.
Yeah.
But I'm also hearing loads of people that are having problems off the back of the vaccines and what have you. If you look at the difference between the stats of the number of people that are dying of coronavirus now and the number of people that are dying from the vaccine, I'm not sure what's worse.
Yes.
It's perverse. It's perverse.
And they are deliberately overestimating the worst affected from the coronavirus, and deliberately underestimating the number of people badly affected by the vaccines. Because you look at the yellow card system, and it's almost like come back to us and let us know if you've died. That's how ludicrous the yellow card system. And you compare that then, if they were counting in the same way, they applied the same methodology. Everyone within 28 days of a vaccine who has died is counted as a death from the vaccine. Well, how many would it be then? It would be significantly more than under the yellow card system that's currently used. And as you say, we all had an image in our minds. We may not have been specialists, but we kind of think pandemic, that means something really serious. That's a real threat to all of us. We did not think pandemic, that means an ordinary flu season under a different name. We would not have classified that as a pandemic, and we would not have said that, everyone has to mask up, everyone has to behave this way. Now, we've got coronavirus is actually less dangerous to people than flu in most age categories. We've known that for a long time. The CDC in America admitted that a long time ago. We've actually had kind of off-camera, informally, but a Biden White House spokesperson was chatting with journalists about how they had overestimated the number of cases, and they'd underestimated the number of people that already had herd immunity. So they believed their figures were completely wrong on how dangerous coronavirus was, and it's no more dangerous than the common seasonal flu.
Patch Rabbit.
I've watched that footage.
Patch Rabbit in the comments at Revolution Radio. He's on after this show. Listen to Revolution Radio after this show. He's a lovely bloke, is our Patch Rabbit, and he says, whatever your definition of it might be, you wouldn't have to be told that there was a pandemic or not. And that's it, isn't it? It's like now they're asking you to be tested for coronavirus and telling you that you've got this disease, even if you don't have any symptoms, you feel fine. I mean, what kind of
I saw an image the other day of a testing centre that had been set up specifically for people with no symptoms. So it was a no symptoms testing centre, and if you had any symptoms, you shouldn't get a test. How absurd is that? Under that kind of thinking, I've got no symptoms of dengue river fever. am I going to be counted amongst the victims of dengue river fever now because I have no symptoms? That's how absurd it is. And you know, they are looking for a threat. I'm not one of those people who dismisses it entirely. I'm not one of those people who says, it was made up.
We're not. I mean, it is affecting some people in a nasty way, but it's the hype, isn't it? It's the exaggeration.
Absolutely. And it is tragic for those people and their families who die from it. But they're a tiny, 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 tiny minority. And we haven't responded in this way to previous threats to people's health. We didn't respond this way to very bad seasonal flu seasons. You know, we've never responded like this. And all our pandemic preparedness, by the way, emphasised that lockdowns weren't effective and shouldn't be applied. And we ditched that. We threw that out. For some strange reason, we decided to no, we're going to treat this in a completely different way. And we were going to engage on the greatest medical experiment ever initiated on a populace in a democracy. Why?
Well, that's exactly what it feels
unnecessary.
Like. Yeah,
it is.
That's exactly what it feels like.
These products haven't been licensed. The the companies who are producing them have been given special legal exemption, so we can't sue them if they harm us with it. We can't sue them if a friend or family member dies, and we're not properly taking account of the number of people who have had adverse reactions or have died. In every way you can imagine, we don't have informed consent on these vaccines. And, even calling them vaccines, well, some of them aren't vaccines.
They don't vaccinate, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. they are novel medical treatments, which are experimental and which have never been applied to large populations before. And this is a huge gamble. This is an absolutely massive gamble with people's lives in response to a threat that wasn't that big a threat. And there's very little justification for it.
It does beg the question, are they trying to kill us?
Well, I can see how people get to that point, especially when some of the advocates of this, in organisations like WF, like Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab has written books on how the population of the world needs to be reduced.
Yes. The World Economic Forum leader.
Yeah, the World
Klaus
Economic
Schwab.
But this is not me being fantastical or making things up.
Oh, this is a fact.
Find these books. Yeah, it's a fact. He's written books which advocate for a reduction of the world population. And the same is
Bill
true.
Bill Gates, similarly.
Absolutely. Bill Gates, similarly. The same is true of Bill Gates. The people supplying the cure for us all, Bill Gates, a major pharmaceutical investor, one of the biggest pharmaceutical investors in the world.
Yeah. Biggest independent investor into the WHO as well.
Yeah, into the World Health Organization. The people advising us that our response should be mass vaccination of the population are the people who profit from mass vaccination of the population directly. So they've got self-interest there to do that. But there are also people who have these kind of crazy, balmy, lunatic ideas that the best thing we can do is reduce the world's population by 20%. And those are the people you put in charge of your responses, or that you take advice from for your responses to a pandemic. The people who actually want people to die off. Even if there is no conspiracy, even if there is no desire on their part to kill people, it's a huge gamble and risk that wasn't necessary. So you don't have to believe in a conspiracy to listen to what I'm saying on this. All you have to know is that these things aren't fully licensed. They haven't passed full clinical trials. You'll be told they've passed full clinical trials, but they haven't. The websites of the companies that produce these things themselves admit that the earliest any one of them will pass clinical trials is 2023, and that's right. On their websites.
The FDA stateside. What is it? The Federal Drug and Administration, basically that license medicines. They have not approved any of these vaccines in inverted commas, except for emergency use,
Yeah.
but they're not approved in the way that, and also another thing, as I understand it, there's been no vaccine rollout ever that hasn't been pulled back with way, way less side effects than has been the case with these vaccines. And they're just, and yet there's a push, for example, in the States now, there are many schools that are saying, we're not going to admit you in the fall, in the new school year, unless you've been vaccinated. They're kids.
Yes. Well, that's utterly obscene, I think. It's
child abuse.
It's child abuse, and it's bad enough what they've done to the adult population. When you're getting to the point where, and there are people that are kind of serious advisors on this, who are the people that the government are listening to, who have been pretty plain that they would support forced vaccination of children without parental consent. This is the behaviour absolutely of a tyranny, and it's medical experimentation on children. That's what we're talking about.
Oh, Daniel, man. Well, you're a father of two.
Yes.
How do you? I mean, how concerned are you?
I'm very concerned. I mean, I'm fortunate in one regard in that if it is rolled out to children in the UK, for example, my children would be the last affected because they're very young. My eldest is 4 and my youngest is 2. But I would consider it my moral duty as a father to do everything in my power to oppose the vaccination of my children with experimental medicines, including physical resistance. What little physical resistance a 47-year-old overweight biscuit lover can provide, that I would. Because
what about you? Have you been vaccinated or?
No, I haven't. No, I've not had the vaccine because I see no reason to put a medical experiment in my body in response to a threat that isn't much of a threat to me. That's no more of a threat than seasonal flu is to me.
By the way, sorry, that was you could have told me it's none of my business. By the way, I would have been perfectly happy with that.
No, I'm perfectly happy to tell people I haven't been vaccinated.
It is odd, isn't it, that we're now? I mean, I went out my building here where I live to go shopping the other day, and I wasn't wearing my mask. They're very hot on masks in Spain. And I saw one of the neighbors with her dog, and I started petting her dog. And then the neighbor, well, where's your mask? I said, oh no. She said, have you been vaccinated? And I didn't think to say it's none of your business, but I just said no. And before I finished a single syllable word, she was pulling her dog by the leash well away from me and walking away. This is a lovely woman who,
God.
It's
frightening, isn't it? It's frightening when people have been conditioned and brainwashed to that extent. Because, would you react in that way to someone who said, I've got the flu? You wouldn't. And this is
you might walk away slowly.
Well, I might object to someone if they actually coughed in my face or,
there would be a cloud of dust.
But then, I've got 2 small children, and I've had the misfortune to have a sick child when one of them was ill vomit directly into my mouth, open mouth. So,
cheers for that. Cheers, Daniel.
One of those bonuses of parenthood that people don't tell you about. But this level of paranoia and treating everyone else as a disease vector is deeply unhealthy itself psychologically.
Again, I wonder how much there is an agenda for divide rule so that we are more easily manipulated. And it brings me back to really what I wanted to spend a bit of time with you on and ask you your thoughts on, which is this great reset. So, for example, we've had Charlie Boy, Prince Charles, write about it. We've had Boris wear its logo lapel pin thing 3 months ago. Not for long, interestingly. It's almost as though, oh, hold on, we're not ready to roll that out yet. Put it back in the box. The media spoke about it for about 2 days. They mentioned the Great Reset. And then again, it was under the carpet. That was in the UK. Justin Trudeau over in Canada, big fanboy. And he went on telly saying that coronavirus was an opportunity to, quote, to roll out the Great Reset. Actually used the word opportunity.
Yes, yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think most
this
of the policies,
theory?
most of the restrictive totalitarian policies we've seen, most of the things that are moving us towards a social credit system on the style of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, those things have definitely been either opportunistically or pre-planned. But either way, those things are deliberately being tacked on to pandemic responses, and it's obvious, and that's what the Great Reset means. You know, nobody has put this forward in a manifesto to the public.
No.
They've never said in any election in Canada, in the US, in the UK, in European nations, they've never said, do you want a fundamental alteration of the way the economy works, the way trade works between nations, the way you form your daily working life? Do you want your government to have a great reset? They've never asked people, and I don't think they ever will, because they know that most people will say, no, we don't want this. You know, but all sorts of things are being pressed at the moment. Some of them ludicrous. You know, you get organisations like the WEF telling people that we should start eating insects now, and it might be racist to not eat insects. You know, we get people kind of pushing the idea now that you know, cow farts are destroying the planet, and we've got to move away from meat. You know, these are kind of fundamental shifts in eating habits and daily life, and you know how agriculture is organised, for example. So they're trivial on one level, but why are all these different organisations, which we see it from pressed from UN bodies, we see it pressed from national governments, we see it pressed from the WEF, we see it pressed from G7 meetings? Why do they all have this notion of a great reset? You know, and they're using the same slogans, the same terminology with the same ends. So it's not a great leap to consider this something that they have decided together and decided that they will push in undemocratic fashions. You know, it's not a conspiracy theory because they're saying it themselves. And Boris Johnson made it his keynote speech at the last Conservative Party conference. He spoke about the Great Reset in that.
Yeah, he did. And Nick Hancock also has been a big fanboy over the years. He's given speeches for it and what have you. The health minister in the UK.
It's all stuff that nobody has voted on and nobody has been given the opportunity to vote on. Because, you know, what do they mean by this? Well, you look at the actual policies that they're endorsing and supporting as part of this. And the Great Reset is that we should be more atomised, socially atomised. So we're working from home.
What does that mean?
You know, well, you kind of divide us up into little groups. You know, we're not meeting in offices or workplaces where we're told to socially distance. You know, that's part of the Great Reset. You know, dividing people.
Well, this is very convenient for that then, to condition people into that.
Exactly, and it makes people easier to control. You know, when I say atomizing people, I mean separating the links between them, and
so they can't communicate.
So they can't communicate, debate. They can't organise, they can't disobey, really, because they're an individual fighting against a bigger force. And all of the moves that we're told are positive for the environment and positive for dealing with coronavirus are things that reduce us in terms of our ability to interact with others and to plot dissent. You know, the American Revolution, the American War of Independence, people gathered in coffee houses to start that. You know, it was social gathering that started the American Revolution. You know, if you ban people from meeting in coffee houses or pubs or restaurants,
which is what they've done,
you ban people from owning guns.
Largely,
you ban people from stepping outside their door. You say it's for their safety, but all of these measures also make it a lot easier for you to rule them without their consent. And this is just logical. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is purely logical.
Yeah. The Schwab and the WEF, the World Economic Forum, they say in one of their promotional videos that by 2030 you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yes.
Are they basically trying to usher in global communism here?
Yeah, well, it's not. It's a little bit old-fashioned to call it global communism, because what it is what they want to usher in, and I think this is the agenda. And I don't think it's a kind of conspiratorial leap for me to say this, because, as you say, this very clear quote there: "You will own nothing and you will be happy." What they want is the model of China. You know, this is why they support China becoming a superpower. This is why they are quite happy with China replacing the US, and with, you know, an unelected Chinese premier being more influential globally than a figure like Donald Trump. You know, this is why they were horrified by Donald Trump, but are not horrified.
Well, he stood up.
Easily.
He stood up against the World Economic Forum at Davos,
Yes.
didn't he?
Yes.
And then within a week, Soros said he's got to be gone.
Yeah.
No?
And, you know, the Time magazine article about the US election, which was rigged, which was fixed, which did see massive electoral fraud, you know, which is the greatest assault on democracy in the US we've seen ever.
So, Daniel,
rigged election was to remove him for being a thorn in the side of this overall program.
Seems to me, absolutely. How would you then describe the Chinese model? I mean, I would have described it as communism effectively run by fascists, which tends to be with communism now. How would you describe the Chinese model?
Well, you know, fascism was a child of communism, for a start. This is something we need to understand. You know, fascism was created by Mussolini. Mussolini, until he became the leader of the fascist organisation, was a lifelong communist. His father was a communist. He was steeped in communist rhetoric and thinking. And he was a
How do you go? How do you go?
He was a personal correspondent and close friend of Lenin. So fascism was...
It's a bit of a jump, isn't it? It's a bit of a jump from being if you're going to be a pure communist, where you share everything, presumably, to being somebody that is conspiring with business. You're in politics. You're conspiring with business behind everybody's backs for mutual profit against that of the populace. That's really what fascism is, no? It's a bit of a jump.
Well, it's much less of a jump than you'd think, because obviously their methodologies, as with any totalitarian regime, their methodologies are very similar. And, you know, and both require concentration of power in the state, and the state to be all-encompassing. The difference, the essential difference between fascism and communism is that fascism added an element of nationalism. So communism was internationalist. You know, communism wanted to spread globally. Mussolini added in nationalist rhetoric, and the Nazis in Germany obviously added in nationalist rhetoric, along with a specific focus on Jews. But you read Mein Kampf, and there are passages in Mein Kampf that are identical to communist rhetoric. You know, they're no different. People like Ernst Röhm, who was you know, purged in the Night of the Long Knives, was very, very strongly a socialist. You know, it was the National Socialist Party. So both fascism and Nazism had very, very strong links with communism. And the reason there was such violence between communism and National Socialism, Nazism, is not because they were very different in what they wanted and how they would go about achieving that. It was because they wanted to be the sole power, and they knew that the other one was a significant threat. It was a kind of civil war between very similar brothers. That's the argument between Nazism and communism. And, fascism derived directly from communism. And the difference is an accommodation with business. But the Communist Party of China has now followed that fascist route, and they make an accommodation with business. And they even allow individuals to acquire wealth and individual power. But what they do is that's all under the aegis of the Communist Party. So you can develop your business, and you're free to do that. You can be an entrepreneur in China now, and you're free to do that. But your business is inextricably linked with the Communist Party and will serve the interests of the Communist Party. And that's the deal you do. You can have a beautiful apartment, you can have more than other citizens have, and we still call this system communist, as long as you allow the Communist Party to use your company when it chooses. So,
and it is that association with the Communist Party, that call to duty when required by the CCP, that is what made the association between the UK and Huawei putting in the infrastructure for 5G so incredibly dangerous, no?
Exactly. And that's why those things have to be resisted. And that's why globalists are so dangerous, because they won't resist those things. Whereas a nationalist will. A nationalist will look, well, this is against my national interests. It's against the security and protection of my country and my citizens to have business dealings and links with a country that is a communist regime that controls the companies we're dealing with. And if you look at the people who ousted Trump, you look at Mark Zuckerberg. Well, Mark Zuckerberg wants Facebook in China. There's obvious commercial reasons why these people would align with China and against Trump. That you look at the relationship that's developed between big tech and social media companies in America and the Democratic Party in the US. And it's the same kind of relationship that exists between the Communist Party in China and businesses like Huawei and like TikTok. Those businesses are allowed to flourish as long as they support the party.
How much power do these people need?
Well, I know. Well, there's no end point to it, is there? There's no end point to it. That's the terrifying thing.
I really, truly believe that we should test public servants for psychopathy as a matter of course. Yeah. It seems to me that is a crucial thing we need to do. It's like turds rise to the top.
I think it's almost not so much that every official or bureaucrat will be a psychopath. It's that a large bureaucracy, by its very nature, becomes self-serving, and the bureaucracy itself, through its agents, will act in a psychopathic manner towards the general populace. Because
that's a kind of
the bureaucracy is
group
interested
thing.
Yeah,
is it a group
thing? And all the bureaucracy is interested in is spreading its influence and power and size. And this is the inevitable consequence of deferring responsibility from individuals to an organisation. And this is why I'm a libertarian. Ultimately, I'm not an extreme libertarian. I think that I'm not opposed to some kind of minimal government existing to prevent outright anarchy, but I take the Hurrah idea, the Thoreau notion that government is best which governs least of all. You know, keep it minimal and aim towards keeping it minimal, because the thing itself will always want to grow and serve its own interests. You know, and people within a large bureaucracy can always defer responsibility to the organisation rather than themselves for things they do. So, you know, Matt Hancock can say, well, it wasn't me. We took this as a cabinet decision collectively. You know, Boris Johnson can say, it wasn't me. We all decided.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah, there's plausible deniability at every level. And people can almost completely defer their moral responsibilities as an individual because they're part of a large organisation. And that's what tends me towards libertarianism, because of the way these large organisations will behave. The larger it is, the more it will tend towards the kind of mass scale of incompetence that is indistinguishable from evil.
I think a lot of people agree with you, stateside. Our folks listening stateside, I know that a hell of a lot of them do agree with you, for the simple reason that the town hall turnouts for Dr. Ron Paul were fantastic, weren't they? They were enormous.
Yes, I mean the Libertarian Party is a kind of funny phenomenon in the US. I mean, Ron Paul is obviously part of the Republican Party, and the Libertarians as a separate party don't score very well. I think they get about 3% on average. So there's it's very like the UK in that you've got these two main parties that seem to be the only options, and all the good ideas are in the other parties, principally the little parties that never get anywhere. But
this Pepsi challenge scenario. This Pepsi challenge scenario. Let me take some comments, because we've got some cracking comments coming in as well. Sure. Kenneth Noel Gabriel Curran. God bless you, Kenneth, mate. It's so lovely to see some of these names around and about that I haven't seen for months. A case of Corona. Hick, 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 hooray. I'd rather have a pint of the black, refreshing liquidation. Mate, Kenneth, I'd forgotten what a tongue-twisting you were. Yes, Celtic Vixen people watch the MSM and are scared. They believe what they are told. I'm going to be asking Daniel more about the MSM in a minute. That's where we're going to go in a sec. The Beeb, and you guys are on the case. The Celtic Vixen, the Beeb and Sky are the government's mouthpiece. Kenneth Noel Gabriel Curran here to test me again. Where is Mick Jagger's ex? How's Mrs. Murdoch the Sixth? Here comes the sun. And also says BBC, aka the Jim'll Fix It fan club, jewelry, promoting multicultural dysfunctional diversities, occasioning hurt, harm, injury, and loss to children. Save our children. Hashtag Cole Bibby says on the radio today, said there is a new strain, the long variant. Celtic Vixen also, can I strongly advise that people watch UK column? God bless you, Vixen. Absolutely. UK. Yeah, I'm going to ask you about UK column versus GB News in just a sec, Daniel. They are one of the best news organizations out there. Celtic, they are the best news organization out there, in my opinion. Carlos says, Celtic, I watch UK column, Unity News Network, and Richie Allen. All three are a must. Yeah, Carlos, God bless you, man. Kenneth Noel Gabriel Curran, YouTube, David Nino Rodriguez, Patriot YouTube, Nicholas Veniamin. So yeah, we've got some suggestions there. Celtic Vixen, the Great Reset is the new world order in another name. That is actually spot on, no, Daniel?
Yes, well, it is. We've had conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory confirmed. That's the lessons of the last couple of years. Lots of things that we were told were complete nonsense have been proven to be true, and lots of things that we are being told are true are complete nonsense. And you've got to understand that there is an inversion of truth and reality that is deliberately put out there as propaganda all the time. You know, be skeptical about me as well. You know, be skeptical about everybody.
All of us.
And everybody.
Quite right. And yourself. No, I mean, I doubt what I think we have to. And that's one of the reasons why, personally, I believe in democracy, because it's not a perfect system. Sure, I agree with what Churchill said about that. But on the other hand, collectively, you're far less likely to make a mistake. And if you do cock up, at least you can blame it on somebody else.
I think the political instincts of the ordinary populace are always better. 9 times out of 10, not always, 9 times out of 10,
more pure,
are better than the political instincts of the ruling class. You know, because they see a bigger picture. You know, who sees the impact of policy first? The person on the street. They're the ones who see the impact of policy straight away. You know, someone who's protected in a bubble of privilege, and I hate to use this kind of leftist terminology, but someone who is protected like that will see it last, if at all. And that's just a common sense reality.
Celtic Vixen's got a question which I want to leave to the very end. It's it's so depressing. How the hell do we fight against something that's becoming so insurmountable? And I you know, that is the biggest question I personally have, and I'm sure a lot of people have as well. But before we get there,
coming from our angle aren't the merriest lot, are we? Really, we're not. I mean, we have a good laugh occasionally, but we're pretty cynical and depressed at the moment. So, but I'm not hopeless about all of these things. I think there is hope, and there are ways to respond. So,
well, look, hold on. I do want to get there, but one of the concerns I have is that we're not going to get there through the fourth estate, nor the fifth estate. For example, now they're trying to push through this law in the UK that essentially hands editorial, total authority to the social networks, the Zuckerbergs, the Nick Cleggs of this world, so that Ofcom, for example, doesn't get to say what. In other words, bodies that are put together by people elected by the public no longer will get to choose what is and isn't, shouldn't be censored and what have you, i.e. nothing coming from the electorate. Instead of that, all going to be decided in Silicon Valley, which, as you say, wants to do the bidding of China. That's frightening in itself. But also the media. There was a poll, I don't trust polls, sure, but 37%, this poll reckoned yesterday, 30% of the British public trust the mainstream media. The real headline there is that 63% don't trust the mainstream media. They spun that. But nonetheless, people are not on the streets saying enough. Shouldn't people be picketing the BBC?
Well, the problem is, yes, they should. I'd encourage people to do that straight away. You know, the BBC are a grotesque, disgusting, parasitic organisation that pumps out lies constantly. You know, they and their internal reports, they've had 5 internal reports into their reporting that have acknowledged left-wing bias at the BBC. And, you know, you will not get any truth from the BBC whatsoever. And, you know, we've seen it. We saw it with Brexit. We've seen it with Trump. We've seen it with the US election, where there's huge amounts of evidence of the fraud, which no mainstream media have ever discussed. And we see it with lockdown measures, when only now, I think a few mainstream media outlets are beginning to question things a little bit now. You know, you'll get articles questioning lockdown in the Telegraph, for example. But as defenders of our liberty and freedom, they are useless because they have no interest in our liberty and freedom. Their primary interest is their power and position. You know, the idea that the mainstream media is any way a defender of democracy is a joke now, because they do the exact opposite. They are the enemies of democracy. And people will say, oh, how dare you use that kind of rhetoric and that kind of language? No, well deserved. It's well earned. The mainstream media is utterly vile.
Are we not seeing a little bit of movement? For example, with the Daily, I mean, I wonder how much of this is my perception, whether we're seeing a little bit of movement, but also I'm acutely aware of somebody that's studied the media over some years now and worked in it as well, that the media is very good at playing both sides, but they just play one side a bit more than the other. And I think that, for example, talk radio is a great example of that. All this new thing, GBN, that, you know, are pretending to be anti-woke and all the rest of it, but they're still pushing the vaccine. My question, is that right? Or are we actually seeing a few more, say, Alison Pearsons in the Telegraph, who are maybe a bit more questioning what's going on?
We are seeing a bit of pushback, but none of that originated in the mainstream media. All of that pushback is the mainstream media responding to grassroots alternatives to the mainstream media. So, you know, the alternative media that was online. But of course, a lot of those people are being silenced, have been silenced. So someone who gives reportage like Paul Joseph Watson, you know, he does reports, he does research. He's not a professional journalist. He does opinion pieces, but they're opinion pieces that express the opinions of millions of ordinary people.
He's a vocational journalist, and you could argue there's a lot more power to that.
The thing is, to me, that's more of a mark of legitimacy than being a professional journalist these days.
Yeah.
Because professional journalists aren't according to the... And I've had people, by the way, tell me this themselves, who were professional journalists for decades, you know, people who are involved in that field, who tell me now what we're doing is not professional journalism. What you see in, you know, the Sun or the Mirror, the tabloids, but also all the quality papers, the so-called qualities, you know, the Times, whatever, all of the papers, all of the and TV stations as well, they're not doing journalism in terms of objectively looking for evidence and then presenting that in a fair and neutral manner. What they're doing is activism, you know, and all of the reporting on Trump was activism. There was no fair journalism on Trump whatsoever at any point by any mainstream channel. They spat hatred, and they ran with conspiracy theories. You know, Russia collusion was a conspiracy theory, cooked up, outright lies, a conspiracy theory that was actually funded by the Democratic National Congress and by Hillary Clinton's campaign team. You know, and
Daniel,
these are proven facts now.
You're absolutely right. 100% verify that. We've got 2.5 minutes, and so one or two very, very fast fire questions, please. There's a new news operation in the UK that a lot of small C conservatives were very excited by, hoping that it would basically do what the BBC should be doing, i.e. protecting the interests of the British people. GB News. What are your thoughts? Are people right to be excited, or what?
It's a good move. It's a positive move. Support them to an extent. Watch them. But Andrew Neil was a mainstream journalist, mainstream figure, and he was very clear. You know, he was one of the people who considers the electoral fraud issue a conspiracy theory. He dismissed without any investigation or research or analysis all the evidence of fraud in the US election. And as you said, you know, GB News is pushing the mass vaccination line as well. So Andrew Neil made statements that were very clear that there's lots of opinions that I would consider valid and should be debated, should be discussed, that they won't air and they won't talk about, or they sneer at. And you can see from how Andrew Neil treated Ben Shapiro in the famous interview that they had, that he is quite mainstream. But he will question a little bit of wokeness. and any questioning of wokeness is good. You know, so
maybe
it's a positive move, but these people won't be our saviors.
Maybe it's purely coincidental that he was in Epstein's diary. Maybe, for all we know, Epstein just put big names in his black book just for the hell of it. And I would say that. Now, well, why do we need GB News when we've got UK Column? You've got 10 seconds on this.
Go to both is my answer. That's all. Go to as many sources that aren't absolutely outright woke as you can, but stop watching the BBC for the rest of your life. Stop watching ITV and Channel 4. You know, don't give them a penny. Don't give them your time.
Where does your confidence come from? Okay, this is coming back to Celtic Vixens. It's so depressing. What on earth do we do against this seemingly insurmountable situation? You've got 15 seconds on this.
Well, my confidence comes from the fact that, you know, you look at all the pressure that was applied on the American election issue, then you look at polling, there's still loads of people out there who know the truth and support the truth.
Right.
You know.
That's it. Daniel. Daniel, God bless you. That was Daily Chaos. Olly Connelly, Daniel Jupp. I knew we'd have nothing to talk about. God bless you. See you next week. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio. Broadcasting.
Oh, blimey. What can I say? What can I say? That's it, folks. Tuning out of YouTube and dailychaos.news as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next week. Please support Revolution Radio. Revolution.radio is a fantastic network. Go check it out. And also go check out Expat Radio as well. I'm going to pull. I can't pull Daniel back in. Well, I can. Hold on. Just briefly. Daniel, I'm going to call you back. I'm going to hang up and call you straight back, just to say goodbye. Because why not? Because what a geezer. What a lovely bloke. What a great head on his shoulders. He's unavailable. No worries. Hey, I think you will be coming back on the show. We did joke. What on earth would we have to talk about? Well, it wasn't dull, was it? Aye. I'll catch you next week. Daily Chaos, Olly Connelly. Ciao, ciao. Hey Daniel, hold on. We're still streaming.
Olly,
We're still streaming.
Call me again.
I did. I just wanted to say thank you, and we're still streaming. But man, that was awesome. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad we didn't run out of things to talk about. If anything, I was a bit too talkative. So
no, you were awesome. You were terrific, and man, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you lot for tuning in. Thanks for your comments. It is so lovely to see some familiar names in the comments as well. It's really nice to hook up between Daily Chaos on YouTube and Daily Chaos News and Revolution Radio as well. That's one of, this is, I guess, last question to you, Daniel. Seems to me what we need to do more than anything is not give up, but we so need to be united, us various networks, activists, what have you, huh?
Oh, absolutely. We need to organise. We need to support each other as much as possible, and we need to be more politically active, more engaged, and more ruthless, because the other side are, and that's where we lose. We want individual freedom, but we're going to have to sacrifice a bit of our own freedom by our own choice, and engage more. Give up a bit of our time and do things, because it's only by being active like that we will change anything. Yeah. God bless you, man. God bless you, Daniel. You take care.
Cheers. Have a lovely afternoon.
And you too. And to everyone else, thank you to everyone for listening in. And I hope I said some things that made sense.
You made a lot of sense, mate. You made a lot of sense. Thank you.
Cheers, Ollie. Cheers. Bye,
cheers,
then.
everybody. So that is it. That is it. Yes. Catch you next week, next Thursday. I don't know who's on next week. I'm hoping to get Sonia Poulton on. To talk about white hats in the media. Who can we trust?